All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. This is DFS Army's NBA pre-lock show, where we're here to answer your questions, talk through your concerns, but really just go through each game. I'm going to show what I'm doing in the domination station, my strat for this slate, and talk through the news and go from there. If you're new to DFS Army, link is in the description. Promo code BOB if you want access to the domination station, the cheat sheets, the Discord, all of that. But if you're here just to kind of see what the game plan is, sit back, relax. We have a lot going on this slate. Also, we're back. It's been a little bit. We had the All-Star break, give us a little bit of a break, but we're right back into it. It almost feels like we never left. Rodney, what's up? Thomas, has it been forever? I feel like time flies for me, man. It doesn't feel like it's been that long. But let's get into it. First up, we have the Memphis Grizzlies going up against the Indiana Pacers. For the Grizzlies, they're one of the few teams that don't really have any injury news at all. The matchup against the Pacers is nice. This game has the highest total on the slate at 250 and a close spread. That is the only reason I'm forcing exposure here. I think you can probably get away from this slate or I think you could probably get away from this game on this slate just because there's so many just really good spots on it. But I always attack these high total games. Ownership's going to be lower than it should be, so that's part of why I'm taking some shots here. Again, with Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson all healthy, it's hard to get overly excited about these guys, but I put a 3% min on Jaren Jackson Jr. Against the Pacers, you can beat them with bigs relatively easily. Jaren Jackson fits the mold for me there since Zach Edey is not trustworthy at all. And so I have a 3% min on JJJ and then a 10% min on Desmond Bane. He's just a little bit cheaper than Ja. He's been a little bit more involved here recently too, and so I just like having some exposure to him. You can easily make a case for Ja, but he just hasn't shown that same ceiling so far this season, so I'm just not as excited to go there. Ownership is low though, which is nice. Let's see. Any other Grizzlies showing up? Yeah, we have a little bit of Vince Williams showing up right at 6%. He's fine. Vince is just another value play on this slate. 3,100. I'm going to see around 18 minutes. Honestly, I'm not overly excited about it. I don't expect him to be in too many of my lines, especially as we get closer and closer to lock. I'm going to continue to refresh the domination station, and that should, I expect he'll continue to kind of fall out. That has already happened to Santi Aldama. He was showing up a bit for me earlier, but he's lowering as we get closer to lock, and I expect that to continue to be the case. He's another guy who's a fine value, but as we go through some of these games, you'll see there's actual injury news where some of these really crappy 4K guys are going to see 20, 30 minutes tonight, and I would much rather bet on that than these guys who are going to have to be super efficient with their time. And that's it. Next up, we have the Pacers. This team is a pain in the ass to see on every slate, but they have a good matchup going up against Memphis. This is another team that's pretty healthy. Let's see. They do have a couple guys out. Let me pull it up. We have Indiana. Boom. Isaiah Jackson's out, but again, that doesn't really matter too much these days. So what we're looking at here is really just the soft matchup against the Grizzlies. They just play at such a fast pace. It allows for good fantasy production typically. And because of that, I'm going to take a shot on a guy like Halliburton. He doesn't stand out for me following kind of like my typical process of like looking for plays in the sim model or really attacking super soft matchups. It's just a positive game environment. And I want exposure to a guy like Halliburton who has slate breaking upside. Siakam is just a good play on paper in the sim model. Great matchup against the Grizzlies. I really like Siakam here. I have a 20% min on him and a like. I'll probably take that like off once we get past the show because sometimes I just kind of have that as a reminder of just a good play and a play that stood out in the sim model. So I just wanted to focus on him, but the like probably won't be needed. He's showing up in 28% of my lines. That's about right. I would like to see him stay there. So if that fell without the like, I'll revert to keeping the like. So we'll see what happens there. Let's see who else. Then we have Aaron Nesmith showing up in about 10% of my lines. Again, this is a good game environment, so I'm not trying to get away from playing these guys. I never trust guys like Nesmith or Nimbard or Matherin. The list can continue, but I'm okay with them showing up naturally in the domination station. I'm not going to over tinker that. Matherin showing up in 2% of my lines. Turner showing up in 1%. Again, not enough to really probably make or break my slate, but they're showing up enough, worth at least talking about them. Okay. John said, just want to get a shout out for the Domination Station. Help me win some good money. Thank you. Yes, Domination Station coming through clutch. Also, shout out to you, John. Awesome job winning that tournament. Darius said, yo, 250 point total is crazy. Exactly. And it doesn't have that much ownership either. I mean, I get it. There's a lot of really good plays on the slate, but I've got to have some exposure to this, even if these two teams make me want to throw up. Seymour said, the Army is back. Let's go. Agreed. Did you miss these NBA dump bums? No, because the All-Star break was just so bad that I just had to just continue to hear about them being bums, you know? So I feel like I still have a bit of a taste, but at least hopefully now they can help us win money, and that helps. Yeah, NBA is back. I'm pumped too. It should be a good one. B-Dubs will be back tomorrow, so that's gonna be great. But hopefully we can do well tonight too. Tattoos high on the NHL, crushing it. You know, tattoo. NHL's fine. I just find it kind of boring unless it's like the playoffs, unfortunately. That's a me weakness, not a sports weakness. It's just something I can't get past. I've tried. I try really hard, but it is what it is. Okay, anyway, that's it for the Pacers. Like I said, this is a game you want exposure to, and I'm forcing it. For the Celtics, this is a team that's going relatively under the radar because they are healthy and they're facing a Sixers team that's a pretty solid defense. And so not too many of these guys stand out. I want to take a shot on Boston, at least one of their players, because we know this Sixers team can be picked on. I just think the Sixers have that brand of just being a really good defensive team. They have Paul George, who's been struggling defensively. They have Joel Embiid, who's been a bit of a weakness as well. So I don't think this is as tough of a matchup as it looks like on paper. And so I'm taking a shot on Tatum. You could easily make a case for Brown or White. For me, it's just Tatum. I just like paying up because we do have a good amount of value on this slate, and he's one of those guys that's just not seeing a lot of ownership. So Tatum was the guy I forced exposure to. Outside of that, I'm not getting a lot of exposure to any of the other Celtics. Drew Holiday is showing up a little bit. He's seeing some decent ownership at 4,400. I get it. I understand the play. He's just not showing up for me too much because, in my opinion, there's better value. He's not value I'm mad at, though. I'm comfortable and I like seeing him show up. It's just he's not a priority for me at this point on the slate. It's so weird seeing Drew Holiday be this cheap and him not be an automatic lock. He's just another viable option. And if you're wondering why, it's just because his usage rate has decreased so much on this team. He's still seeing minutes, but guys like Derek White are outproducing him, not necessarily from like an impact on the floor perspective, but just from a DFS perspective. He's not giving us a lot of points anymore. Doesn't mean he won't or can't. He just hasn't been. So I'm not going to make him a priority. Next up, we have the 76ers going up against the Celtics. This is a tough matchup for any team. Joel Embiid rarely does well against the Celtics. I mean, he also just rarely plays, so we don't see it too often, but I'm not overly excited about the matchup. The price tag made me want to think about it, but I'm not doing it. Same thing for Maxey, PG. Everyone looks like they're priced appropriately. The only guy who stood out for me was Quentin Grimes. This is more of a sim model play. He didn't stand out too much in the domination station by himself, so I put a 6% min on him. Just another relatively cheap guy who has a ton of upside that I wanted some exposure to, so I put a 6% min on him and the like to make him show up a little bit more, and he's still only showing up right at 6%, so I'm okay with keeping that. He's someone I wouldn't want more than like 15% of, but I do like having him in the mix. He's just been pretty consistent with this new role on the team. Yeah, exactly, Tattoo. No hate. No hate. Yeah, man. The Wimby thing is tough. Like, blood clots, Tattoo are serious. Like, it's so sad with, like, basketball players. Some of the, like, I think about Chris Bosh. There's so many just, like, really good players who could have been great, who the blood clots just kind of ruined their entire career. I'm hoping that's not the case for Wimby, but that's one of those, ooh, hopefully it's not that bad moments. All right, next up we have the Magic going up against the Hawks. For the Magic, we've been here before. Paolo feels a little too cheap at 8,300, but he's been disappointing us. Franz has been in fantastic form, so we feel a bit better about this. The Hawks are a team we can pick on. We know they're a team we can pick on. We always pick on them, and it works out 9 times out of 10. This is a spot where I'm going to pick up and go right back to them once again. 15% men on Franz, 15% men on Paolo. And, I'm just going to do it all over again. When it comes to how much exposure we actually have, we have about 17% exposure to Paolo, which I like. I do like Paolo a bit more than Franz tonight. And then Franz is right at 16% ownership. So we'll see what happens there. But I like being at least at field weight, ideally a little bit above field weight. They're tough for single entry. I don't hate having them in there, but they are a little bit harder for me to get to in single entry lines. And then Jonathan Isaac is showing up in about 7% of my lines. Not a guy I'm overly excited about, but he's 3,400. He has plenty of upside. We've seen it happen time and time again, but he doesn't typically see the court too often. And let me double check the injury report. With Suggs out, it does help the case a little bit, but not enough where I feel like he's someone I'm trying to force into lines. That's just one of those domination station plays. I'm just going to trust it. But if he goes above 10%, I'm going to cap it. Little bit of a fringe play. For the Hawks going up against the Magic, tough spot, opposite scenario. We don't really look at the Magic as a team that we want to attack. I have heard some whispers. People are looking at Trae Young. I couldn't get there. I mean, we know he has upside for days, but this is not a spot I'm going to force exposure to him at. Larry Nance Jr. is still out. Jalen Johnson's still out, which means Onyeka Okongwu should still continue to see a ton of minutes. Last time out, I was a little nervous about Okongwu going up against the Knicks, a really good defensive team, and he crushed. So until proven otherwise, I am going to continue to play him because he's seeing a ton of minutes and he's being very productive with those minutes. He's only seeing 6% ownership. Sim model liked him as well, so I put a 7% min on him and called it a day. He is the only Hawks player I'm really looking at, and he's showing up in, even with the min, only 3% of my lines. So probably going to have to rerun and uncheck that if I care enough and just kind of go from there. And what I mean by that is I go back and forth. Sometimes I'll uncheck this prioritize completing lineups above min/max exposure settings. And when I do that, it means that my mins are going to be the end-all law. And if I make too many, that means I won't be able to run enough lines. When I check this box, it means that it's going to listen to my mins as much as it possibly can. But if I make too many, then it won't be able to. So it just kind of depends. Okongwu is one of those guys I like, but I'm not going to go out of my way to change all of the mins I have on other players if he's the only guy I'm not getting enough exposure to. That's usually the way I think about it. It just kind of comes down to prioritizing. All right, next up, we have the Cleveland Cavs going up against the Nets. Another game that's just a little boring on paper. Doesn't stand out from a total standpoint. Matchups are pretty meh. Dean Wade's out. Okoro's questionable. Ty Jerome's questionable, unless we got that news here recently. But the only guys that stood out for me in the sim model were Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. On paper, let me look a little bit closer at these matchups. I didn't love them. Yeah, the Nets, they just played a pretty slow pace. They're just a fine defense, pretty neutral across the board. Not really any spots that stand out typically. But we know Jared Allen and Evan Mobley have slate breaking upside. I got on them because of the sim model. I'm going to take the likes off of them and just keep the 1% min on Evan Mobley, 4% min on Jared Allen, and call it a day. The thing that you'll realize is I have a few just small mins on players, just kind of spreading out my exposures a little bit that way on guys that I feel like have some upside, and Allen and Mobley fit that mold for me. The Nets are in that same category for me as the Pacers. I just hate seeing them on any slate, but we still have to look at them. They have a brutal matchup going up against the Cavs. Great reason to not really have to look at them overly closely. And then Noah, Clowney, Melton, those guys have all been out for a while, but no one's standing out for me here. You can make a case for Keon Johnson. He's been good at 4,900. Not a bad value play. He's seeing some ownership. Watford, I'm not overly excited about. Let me make sure he's not showing up for me too much before I say anything bad. But yeah, he's not showing up for me, and I don't want him to. I just don't love the matchup for these guys. The one guy that is showing up a little bit is Day'Ron Sharpe. Where is he? At 4% ownership. I'm still going to be under the field, but he's present. The only two guys I would be comfortable with to like being over the field on this slate would be Cameron Johnson and Keon Johnson, and I'm not even doing that. All right, next up we have the Bulls going up against the Knicks. Nice high total at 244, but the spread is terrifying. 11-point spread, but I'm not going to let that scare me. I'm still going to take some shots here, but it does worry me. Any love for Allen? Yep. I do like Allen. We just put a nice min on him, but I didn't go too crazy on it. Okay. So for the Bulls side of this, let me look a little bit closer before I say no. Hell no. The Knicks are one of the best defenses in the league. You can try and make a case. For me, if you hit, it's really just luck. I mean, Kobe White has shown some signs of life with Zach LaVine out. Vucevic has been tough. I mean, he did all right against Detroit, but outside of that, he hasn't shown a lot of upside. I'm not playing these guys. It's just that short and simple for me. Not against the Knicks. It's the other side of this game that I like and that I'm going to take shots from. And first and foremost is already the Bulls. We've been attacking the Bulls all season long. That trend is not going to stop because they're just bad and they just play really fast, and it allows and gives us a lot of fantasy points. So we're not stopping that. The team that gets the benefit is the Knicks, and the Knicks also have injuries, which would have made them more viable against most teams. Josh Hart is out. Josh plays a ton of minutes, just like all the starters do for this team. And he has a huge usage rate on this team. Typically, we've seen a few slates here recently where Brunson struggles. And in those slates, it's usually because Cat and Josh Hart are going off and Brunson's just chilling. He's just passing the ball. That could still happen. Like maybe we see a guy like Bridges go off, or Chua or McBride, Payne, the list goes on. But it does increase the likelihood that Jalen Brunson will have a stronger game with a guy like Hart out. A guy like Precious Achua should start with Hart out. We've seen this happen a few times this season already. And then OG Anunoby is questionable. Huge minutes here. Solid, really good defender. If he sits, that should be a boost to McBride. There's a chance we see Landry Shamet get in there. That starts to get a little weird. But once again, per usual, we just have to watch the lineups. We have to use late swap with some of this news if we don't get it in time. So it is one of those situations. We already know it's a spot we like. Some of these players just become better plays if a guy like OG Anunoby gets ruled out, and if Shamet starts, he just becomes super viable. So I have a like on Cat, a like on Jalen Brunson, and a like on OG and Anobi, especially if he plays. I'm still going to play him in a soft matchup and hopefully at lower ownership, but we'll see if that happens. And then the DS loves these guys. Jalen Brunson is showing up in 97% of my lineups. We'll have to see if that's going to stick. I don't think it will. Karl Anthony Towns is showing up in 78% of my lines. I'm very comfortable with that. Cameron Payne is showing up in 33%. That's almost double the field. Precious Achua showing up in 33%. I like that. Mikal Bridges, I have a 10% min on. Again, the Knicks play their starters a ton of minutes. Soft matchup against the Bulls. Bridges is not a consistent player. He's very streaky. He's not someone that's extremely reliable, but that's why he's low owned. People aren't looking at the soft matchup and the fact that if OG's out, that it just increases his opportunities tonight on this slate. He's hit or miss. He's a dart throw, just like he is on any slate, but he's honestly one of my favorite low-owned plays on the slate. So Bridges is someone I really like, and I put a 10% min on. And then outside of that, we also have some Miles McBride exposure. Like I said, he becomes a bit of a better play if OG gets ruled out, but he's fine showing up currently, just similar in some ways to like a Cameron Payne type of play showing up a little bit right now too. McBride I could get fine with, Payne fine with too, over 30% if OG is out. But if OG's playing, I don't plan on being over 30% on McBride or Payne. So that's something I'm just kind of keeping note of. They're fine value plays, but they're not someone I want to go too crazy on. It's a quick way of just ruining your night real fast and in a hurry. All right, next up we have the Clippers going up against the Bucks. For the Clippers, we have Norman Powell listed as questionable. Biggest thing here is that if Powell's out, that just makes me like James Harden even more, just because Powell's been such a usage hog recently. I mean, all these guys have good usage rates, but no Norman Powell helps James Harden even more. Kawhi Leonard becomes much more of a viable play if Powell gets ruled out. And then even more value on the slate. Guys like Coffee, Jones, maybe even Ben Simmons gets a little bit of a boost for me as well, but we'll see what the domination station does there and kind of go from there. Yep, Tattoo. Grimes is definitely in play. You can't remember if you did. Yeah. I touched on him. He was okay. I like him. He's in my mix. Knicks, yeah, all in. You just don't even overthink it. Dixon said Josiah stacking Brunson and Cat feels like sticking my hand in a wood chipper. It feels awful. It really does. Especially because I feel like Brunson has just been burning us a good bit lately. But with the injuries they have and the soft matchup, you know me, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna do it. As long as it makes sense, I'm okay with it. All right. For the Clippers, like I said, a lot of this, I'm just kind of waiting on the Powell situation. I like James Harden. I always pick on guards against the Bucks. That was just going to happen. You already knew. So 4% min for me there, but this is also like a decent game total, close spread, good game environment, all the good stuff, good reasons for why you would want to stud here. Zubac, I thought about, but it's getting a little hard to trust after that last game. Just need to look at the rotations a little bit more and make sure that they're still utilizing him the same way. And then the matchup against the Bucks is just pretty neutral. So it didn't stand out for me, really, even if nothing changes. All right. And then none of the Clippers show up by themselves, really. You kind of have to force them in if you want them. But like I said, they're not really super viable until we get that Powell news. But 4% min on Harden. Jesse said, who would be the Bulls run back player if you had to choose one against the Knicks? I was going to say, Jesse, you already know. I don't feel like you have to have a run back for NBA DFS. But if you had to pick someone, it would be probably Kobe White for me. And it's not really close on anyone else. Maybe Buzelis. And then after that, Vucevic. But yeah, I don't love that idea. But I understand why you do, because you want it to stay close. But sometimes these teams are just good enough at keeping some of these games close, even when you don't expect it. But who knows? We'll see how it plays out. Hopefully it works out for you. All right. Next up, for the Bucks. This is another one we have to keep a close eye out for the news. A lot of important players are questionable here. Giannis is questionable. Damian Lillard is questionable. Bobby Portis is already out, so thankfully we already know that. But it's really hard to look overly close at this team in a serious way, because if Giannis and Lillard play here, we're not playing these guys against the Clippers. They're a good defense, not a team you want to pick on, and not a soft matchup for any of these guys here. Let me just double check and just make sure I'm not overlooking anyone. Yeah, it's awful for everyone. So I don't love the spot. If you could maybe, yeah, I'm not looking at Andre Jackson. We have better value on the slate. So yeah, the Bucks aren't standing out unless we get injury news. And then we'll look at exposures. No Bucks at all as of right now. Okay. Now things get a little bit interesting as we get closer towards these final 3 games. The Charlotte Hornets going up against the Nuggets. Not a bad matchup here. The Nuggets are not a team we really try and avoid these days. But when it comes to the injury report, that's what made the Hornets just more DFS viable. LaMelo Ball is out, which means Elfrid Payton is going to start. And the guards for the Hornets are once again viable just because everybody on this team is hurt. We've seen this play out. We don't feel great about it, but the Nuggets are a team that have struggled against guards on occasion. So there's some viable guard options here. Mark Williams isn't playing tonight. Debet should see his usual run here. And then Nurkic, his minutes are a bit more solidified as long as Mark Williams continues to not play. Nurkic worries me a little bit. I have a 30% exposure maximum on him because he was showing up in like 50, 60, 70% of my lines. I'm okay with you going and having a lot of Nurkic. You just have to realize that the projection is just really shooting for him seeing an increase in production and seeing more run. So far, we haven't seen him play like more than 20. Let me get the numbers for Charlotte. Yeah, I mean, we haven't even seen him play 20 minutes yet. And so for me, I don't know how likely it is he'll see 26 minutes. It's not impossible. We just haven't seen it yet. So I don't like going significantly over the field on guys like that when we just don't know what's going to happen here. So I put a 30% cap on him. Still a little bit of leverage. If he does see 26 minutes, he goes off. I'm still in a decent spot, have some lines contending, but it's also, I'm not going to allow it to ruin the night if he doesn't. The matchup too. There is a huge matchup narrative here where we love playing Nurkic against Jokic. We've made a ton of money doing that for a while. You're right. The issue for me is we just haven't seen him play more than 20 minutes. So it's hard for me to assume he's going to. Not impossible, just hasn't happened yet. So I'm not going to put too much money behind that. So that's the 30% cap. I have a 5% min on Bridges. Tough matchup. I don't love picking on Gordon too often, but he's the only stud left. Total solid at 226. I just wanted exposure to him, to be honest, at 8,700. So 5% min on Bridges. And then Nick Smith Jr. will show up by himself. Elfrid Payton shows up by himself. Again, we know we can't really trust the guards too much on the Hornets, but they're good DFS plays because they have every opportunity in the world to put up a ton of points here. So for me, Elf is showing up as a core play. He will be a core play for me tonight. I have the cap on Nurkic. He won't show up more than 30% for me. And then Nick Smith Jr. is showing up in 44% of my lines, and I'm comfortable with that. And then looks like no other Hornets, which is honestly kind of ideal. I don't really like anyone else here. We getting the Bridges 5%? Okay, I might have to uncheck or boost his projection to get him to show up a little bit more. But I do like that enough to force it. Dixon said, Josiah, do you think Dyson Daniels can win Defensive Player of the Year with Wemby done? I haven't looked into it yet, but maybe. Wasabi, what's up, JJ? I see you tattoo. All right. Next up, we have the Nuggets going up against the Hornets. For me, I still like picking on this Hornets team. I know they've improved defensively. I know they're not like this super soft matchup that they have been historically. But when they're super beat up like this, they typically play at a slow pace, which isn't great for DFS purposes. But at low ownership and the total still being relatively high, I'm always going to force exposure to these guys. I like playing Jokic throughout the year, but especially post All-Star game. And that's usually for some reason when we just start to see Jokic continue to be under-owned. And in this spot, there aren't too many studs that you feel good about seeing 60 plus points tonight. Jokic is one of those guys. And if the other studs don't come through for us on this slate, I like being over the field on Jokic, and we have the value to do it relatively easily. Let me look a little bit closer at some of these Jokic lines and see if they get too gross. I mean, not really. The only guy I don't love is seeing like a guy like Vince Williams in there, but even a line like this is already forcing Brunson and Cat in that line. Not gonna lie, kind of like it. It's gonna force a guy like Bol in there. He's seeing the minutes. I don't hate that. So that's what I'm saying. I like Jokic tonight more than the field pretty significantly, just because it's not hard to get some really good looking lines with him in there tonight. I might go higher than 15 or higher than 10, to be honest. All right. Next up, we have the Suns going up against the Spurs. We already know if the Spurs buzzkill with Victor out, but it does make things a little bit easier from a defensive standpoint. But like I said, from like a head-to-head perspective, we've always been able to play some bigs here against them. So doesn't change as much as you might think. But for the Spurs or for the Suns, starting off with them, from an injury news perspective, they are pretty healthy. Nothing to really look at here. I don't love the matchup against the Spurs. Like I said, Victor being out doesn't make this a super soft matchup or anything like that overnight. But Bol still in a solid spot at 4,800. And then Nick Richards, I have a 2% min on. Richards is another guy who we haven't seen play or see like 30 plus minutes. But last game against Houston, we saw 27. We've seen some 23-minute performances. We have him projected for 23 here. Again, like I said, the Spurs haven't been like shutting down bigs. And so this is a soft matchup, and going up against Sohan, Nick Richards should be able to feast here. So it's a good spot for Bol and Nick Richards. Both bigs should be able to do fine. And so that's why I have a 2% min on Nick Richards, trying to get him to show up. And I have a like on Bol. Let's see if I need it. 53% with it on. I'm comfortable. I like Bol, but I don't need him on this slate. And what I mean, I don't need him in like 60 plus lines. So I'm going to take the like off of him and see how much he shows up, because he should show up by himself. Okay. And then for the Spurs, this is where things get a little weird. With Victor out, it should impact things a good amount from a usage rate perspective. De'Aaron Fox is the guy who should benefit the most. Obviously, we don't have too many data points of a recent trade with Fox joining this team and with Victor being gone. We don't know exactly what all these rotations will look like, but we have enough information to know that Fox does see a massive increase in usage with Victor off the court, and he is going to be just someone who has more opportunities because he's out. So we put that into consideration, and then we look at the matchup. Phoenix has been pretty good defensively, but De'Aaron Fox is underpriced for this situation. We know that, but the thing I'm going back and forth on with Fox is the ownership. 50% ownership for a guy who is seeing an increasing usage but isn't in a soft matchup. I'm going to take the like off, and he's only showing up in 49% of my lines. Like I said, I understand the increasing usage, but I don't love the spot so much where I'm going to make him show up in 99% of my lines. I like Brunson more on this slate, but I have exposure to both. Guys like Vassell, Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes, they're viable. Spurs on this slate with Victor out. Still don't love the matchup enough to force them in. Is really a guy like Jeremy Sohan who we've seen him crush in these spots with Victor out. He is just used in a ton of different ways for this team. He's the guy I want to see show up. And so he's showing up in 81% of my lines. And yeah, he can be streaky, but in this spot, I feel pretty good about him as long as he can stay out of foul trouble. He will be the Spur I have the most exposure to. And then Vassell showing up in 17% of my lines. Barnes, 3%. Paul, 1%. Keldon Johnson, 1%. I'm under the field on a lot of the Spurs. I just don't like them as much as the rest of the field does. I'll continue to refresh the DS. If that changes and the DS changes its mind on the way it's setting up lines, I'll let it happen. But right now, we're in agreement on it. All right, last game on the slate. And once again, y'all, they are not making life easy for us. We got the news probably about an hour or so ago that Luka Doncic is out. I'm glad they gave us the news early. Not going to lie, I was almost talking myself into taking a shot on Luka. I was like, yeah, he sucked last night, but maybe now in a softer matchup, doesn't matter. He's out. So not looking at him. That did increase my interest in Austin Reeves. We know he sees a nice increase in usage when he's just more involved. And with a guy like Luka out, he should be the main beneficiary there. And then LeBron James is questionable. Late Q-tag-ish makes me start to get a little bit nervous about if he's going to actually play or not tonight. This is the second half of a back-to-back. They played last night. That's news we have to really keep an eye out for. LeBron, if he's out, Reeves becomes the best play on the slate. Great matchup. Good game environment. This is a team we like to see on the slate. Rui Hachimura becomes close to a must play for me on this slate as well. And then Dalton Connect, I think, would be hopefully sneaky in this spot as someone else that I would want to force some exposure to if LeBron James gets ruled out. So very potentially awesome spot for us, but we just got to wait and see. You already know I'm going to go ahead and force some exposure to Rui. Maybe like a 5% min, not trying to get too cute. Austin Reeves, I'm going to be over 10% already without LeBron. That LeBron news is what will make him a core play. And then Dalton Connect, for now, I'll probably have like a 2-3% min on him. But ideally, like I said, if LeBron gets ruled out, I'll probably be at like 10 to 15, something like that. So we'll see. Cedric, what's up, man? Good to see you. For those of you who don't know, B-Dubs will be here tomorrow. So we'll have the full crew back ready for action. But hopefully we can get warmed up in the right way now. Last game on the slate, we have the Portland Trailblazers going up against the Lakers. This Trailblazers team, I'm not going to say it. You already know I don't like this team either. But they're on the slate, so let's see. From an injury news perspective, DeAndre Ayton's out. That's why Flanagan went off last time. He had a great game. Flanagan should start again with Ayton out. And, this isn't really a spot I'm worried about. The Lakers are struggling with whoever they want to use. I mean, we know he'll be going up against Hayes, but this isn't a brutal matchup, and he's still relatively cheap at 5,600 too. So Klingon's someone I like. I want to have exposure to. I have a like on him. How much is he showing up though? I might have to. Okay, and he's showing up in about 19% of my lines. That's appropriate. That's good. So I'm gonna keep that. So I'm just gonna keep the like on him, and hopefully he continues to show up appropriately. And then we have Grant questionable. Scoot Henderson is questionable. Robert Williams is questionable. That doesn't matter as much. But the Henderson and Grant news does. If Grant misses, that makes a guy like Avdia much more viable. Henderson getting ruled out, if he does get ruled out, would make a guy like Simons much more viable for me. Right now, they're not guys I like, but when we get that news, could dramatically impact my thoughts on making sure I get exposure to them. So, like I said, and like we've been saying, you just got to keep a close eye out for the news when it comes to NBA DFS. If LeBron plays, I don't like Connect. No, I don't plan on. Well, with Luka out, I'm okay with like 1 to 2% Connect. I wouldn't play him in single entry. I wouldn't play him in most of your lines, but I am going to have a 1% min on Connect, and that's even if LeBron plays. I'm not going to change that. But not really enough to change too much, to be honest. Simmons, or are you talking about Anthony Simons? Yeah. Simons or Avdia. They're literally like this for me. The cheat answer is if Henderson is out, Simons. If Grant gets ruled out, Avdia. If everyone plays, I would lean towards Avdia just because he's cheaper and lower owned, but I don't really have a lean, to be honest. Thomas, you're all in? You're all in? I like him too. I don't think he's the craziest all-in play. On this slate, I get it. I really do. I'm trying to see if there was someone else I would probably put in that category, but no, I like it. I am going to... Cameron Payne's starting to show up a bit much for my liking. I still like him. I think he's fine, but unless we got that OG news, I'm not going to allow him to show up past like 35%. But again, I'm only going to do that if OG's out. So keep a close eye out for that one. Dixon said, can we please see the highest exposures one more time? Yes. David said, can Lakers play small and make Blazers play small where Klinigan doesn't get that many minutes? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely a possibility. And that's part of why I'm not locking in a guy like Klingon, just because he saw a lot of run last time out. It went well, but coaches always get weird with rotations for God knows why. In this case, if they play small, which is likely for the Lakers, that could be a likely scenario. So not a bad call. But I still like being over the field on him. I'll have around 20% as long as we don't get any crazy news changes. And then highest exposures. Let me take this leg off of Brunson and let's see what we get. Because I do like Brunson a lot. I just don't need him, or at least in theory, I don't feel like I need him in every single line like that. I like to have a chance just in case some of these guys disappoint me. Sohan's one of those guys I'm willing to have a lot of. Like, I don't feel like I need to limit him just because they use him so much when guys go down. But I'll answer your email. All right. But yeah, this is one of those slates where I just feel like we're waiting on so much news. I wish we already had what we were working with because I feel relatively good about what I have right now. But just because there's still so much up in the air, it's hard to get overly excited. So Brunson goes to 64% without the like. I like that. Elfrid Payton's showing up a shit ton. 4K, him starting. He has to start, but he should. I'm okay with that. 90% Sohan. Okay, give me a second. Let me look at something right quick. I gotta make sure I'm not going crazy. And Fox is showing up a lot too. A lot more than I thought he would. I don't know. The Suns matchup just always worries me a little bit. And the Spurs, I just feel like they burn us a lot. But it makes sense for me. I'm going to do a 30. It's going to be what, 33% own. Let's see. When Sohan. Okay, he did struggle a bit against Boston, but he didn't see a lot of run. When he sees 20 plus minutes, he's almost always pretty close to 30 from like a projection standpoint, which is what I'm looking for here. Sometimes he's in like the lower 20s. He'll disappoint against some pretty good defenses. Some good examples of that. How many minutes do we have him projected for? 29. That's good for him. He sees 30 plus minutes. I like it. I can try and talk myself out of it, but I like it. I would do 90. Right now, I have 90% Sohan, and I'm okay with that. 95 would worry me. I would do a 90% max. Elfrid Payton, I like enough where I'm not going to max him. Cat, let me see what happens when I take the like off of him. Just in case this game gets gross. I'm okay not going too crazy on some of these guys. Even though I like them. It's okay to mix it up a little bit. It's funny. Whenever I'm not doing a show, I get notifications from all the apps. I see all the news, but as soon as I click go live, all my watch stops going off. I don't get notifications anymore. So I always feel like I'm blind. I'm like, hopefully there's not any crazy news coming out. Usually y'all are really good about helping me out though and telling me what's coming up, but still, y'all know it's just so important. I'm always just a little antsy about it. Okay, Okoro will play. Yeah, we haven't gotten anything recently. David said, do you like Kawhi for GPPs? No, I'm not a big Kawhi fan tonight. If Norman Powell gets ruled out, then he's a very solid GPP play, but in general, I don't like it. John, I used to play showdowns when I had a ton of time, but I've been tight on time lately, so I don't play showdowns as much, but I miss them. Those were fun. I used to take down a good amount too. TK Moss, though, he'll hook you up. He does really good notes, and he's won so many tournaments for showdowns too. Thomas said, if you are doing the men's already, no need to change uniques. Yeah, exactly. That's my philosophy, at least. Similar ways of getting to different places. And then I can go ahead and talk through kind of like my ideal leverage plays too. So like Jokic is going to be a leverage play for me. I'm going to increase that to 15%. Bridges is going to be a leverage play for me. I'm going to increase that to 15%. And then Grimes was already a leverage play with a 6% min. But I'm going to increase that to 8% just to make it a little bit more solidified. And then the rest of these guys are a little tough. I really want Jared Allen to be a leverage play, but I'm going to save the last leverage play for the cheat sheet because I'm working on a little bit of some tinkering to help me figure out some good calls on. I mean, I've always been really good at figuring out leverage plays. That's kind of how I've taken down the most tournaments, but I've been doing some back testing where the DS can sometimes kind of tell me if they're going to work out or not a little bit in advance. Still tinkering with it a little bit before I show it to y'all, but we'll see. David said I have 7,400 left in the util spot. Okay, let's see. Ooh, yeah, it's a bit of a dead zone. Don't love it. I like 7,500 a little bit more. See when we come across someone. I like Michael Porter Jr. We didn't really touch on him, but I did force exposure to the Nuggets in general. Like that 15% min on Jokic, 2% on Murray, 6% on Porter Jr., 4% on Aaron Gordon. But for that price range going down to 7,400, I like. Ooh, that's still a bit of a drop. I don't know. I would potentially look at some other spots to pivot with. I don't think Simons is bad. I like the injury news will make him a better play, but he's not bad. I think Allen's viable there too. And Mikal Bridges is someone I like as well. Oh, yeah. Thanks, guys. Mikal Bridges from the Knicks. 6,400 Bridges, 15% min. Yep. Mikal Bridges. Miles McBride or Jordan Goodwin? For me, it's Miles McBride, but Tattoo, I'm curious what got you on Jordan. Let me look at him. Jordan, yeah, I mean, let me see how much run has he been getting here lately? Okay, I'm gonna have to dig a little bit deeper on him. Okay. Yeah. Honestly, Jordan's not on my radar too much right now. So I haven't looked at him. But let's see, maybe just in comparison to that 4,100 range. $4,100. My answer would be McBride, though, to be honest, because I do like him. Goodwin just doesn't stand out too much for me. But interesting, I mean, he is seeing like 22 minutes in comparison to that price range. Not awful. Usage rate's a little low. Interesting. All right, y'all. Okay, let's look at the core plays. So we have Peyton, Fox. Okay, Fox is getting a little high for someone that I don't love. So, damn, 50% ownership, 20% leverage. If we do an 80% cap, that's better. Yeah, I'm going to do an 80% exposure maximum on Fox. I'm just getting a little nervous about some of that exposure. Yeah, he's the only one I'm going to do that to. Klingon's starting to climb up for me too. He's shown up in 35% of my lines. Let me refresh and see if that's going to change. It probably will change so much. Let's see what happens. Tattoo said he just showed up some because I unchecked most players of less than 99 points per minute. Yeah, that makes sense. That will happen sometimes. Kawhi or Powell? Ooh, I would lean Powell. He's just been so good, and they've been using him so much, and Kawhi's minutes are still pretty hit or miss. That's part of why if Powell gets ruled out, I think they'll lean on Kawhi just a little bit more, and that's what would make Kawhi a little bit more trustworthy. I would still be a little nervous clicking on it, but I would be more excited about it in that case scenario. Okay. All right. I'm going to take the like off of Klingon because he's starting to show up a bit too much now. And that should bring us back down to earth. He was showing up in 50%. That I liked the guy, but It's a little bit too much. Brunson at 90? We'll see. We'll see. I might be okay with that. Ideally, I'll be around 80, 85, but I'm okay with anywhere from like 60 to that number. Again, with Hart out, I feel a bit better about the Brunson play. He can still be too nice and share the ball, but in a soft matchup like this one, he needs to take control a little bit more. Okay. I have 83% right now, Mo. Again, that feels more comfortable for me being below 90, but I didn't do anything to force it. Okay. So this is what I'm going to run with. I have Sohan, Peyton, Brunson, Fox, and then I'm going to make the final change for my last leverage play. And then after that, I will land on the final core play as well, which will be updated on DFS Army's cheat sheets, roughly around like 640, something like that. So appreciate all the support, y'all. Look forward to hopefully celebrating tonight. Either way, I will see you all tomorrow. And thank God Giannis and Lillard are available to play. One team we do not have to worry about anymore. You can look at them as kind of like a really Giannis more than anybody is kind of like a just play a stud, hope for a ceiling performance type of spot. Let's look a little bit closer at that too. But still, the Clippers are a strong defensive team. I don't like picking on them too much. We've seen him do 50 against the Clippers relatively recently. It's just rare that you see guys put up a ceiling or have a ceiling performance against the Clippers. Yeah. I mean, they're just low-owned, high upside plays, but uphill battle there. Limited minutes? Good. Don't even have to think about it anymore. Don't even need to. Thanks, guys. Yeah, good luck, y'all. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Peace out.